lifestyle, modern society we grew up, you would say familiar with what's happening around us, so different to when we were, let's say, younger, in terms of many of the things we accept as norm nowadays, even the food we eat. Clothes are always changing. The food which we eat has changed considerably. The means of communication have changed considerably in the last half a century. The needs of every one of us are still the same. The same stress, anxiety, it just changes format. I was a few weeks ago in a country called Slovakia. In a country called Czech. You know, if you've heard of Czech, probably Slovakia. And a small group of Hare Krishna members have a small farm just on the Czech side. And they're trying to live a little bit more traditionally, you could say. It's rare now to find people inclined, and they have a sentiment for simple living, and they have a sentiment for natural living, or eco-friendly living, environmental considerations. But the opportunities are difficult. The application is, you can say, maybe secondary in terms of our eating habits or some of our other habits, but practical application of that which will actually evoke change is very rare. Actually living in harmony with nature is a rare. Of course it is there, and in many countries of the world it's still quite prominent. But in our situation, at least in Europe, it's a little bit less common. But there we have one little group, small group no doubt, trying to live a very simplistic life without as many of the dependents that we have in our world today, without mobiles or electricity, at least on the grid, and most of the machinery which goes along with that, washing machines, electric appliances and so on. It's different lifestyle. I remember one time I was living in Australia. Anyone from Australia? Australia? Anyone else? We're in Australia.
Originally from Sydney.
Sydney.
But I live nomadic now.
Where?
I live nomadic now. I don't have a home.
Yeah, in Australia. Kind of interesting country, like very big, of course, and much open space. But I was living there literally in a mud hut. It cost nothing to build. It was just from mud from the property and some things that were found around and about. The water came straight from a spring out of the mountainside, and I wouldn't say I was really living a very natural life in one sense, but I was living in a natural situation. Fruits growing in trees around about, no electricity at all. And it's interesting, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that. When we ask ourselves deeply inside what do everybody's got the same basic question, whether they pose it much or not, but the basic principles there for everyone. And it was interesting, I mean, for some months there, I guess. And satisfaction of a different type of, I mean, somehow or another we're looking for that inner satisfaction. Whatever evokes it, but we're looking for that. Everybody, some are all different modes, nature. Some people are very much in passionate and ignorant modes. And they may get satisfaction by rushing around to some degree at least, fighting, causing aggression sometimes. That's not a very pleasing form of satisfaction to others at least. And it's not very long lasting. So we're looking really for satisfaction, which is a little bit more natural, a little bit more harmonious, a little bit more sustainable within our hearts, deep in. So a feeling of peace, a feeling of contentment, a feeling of satisfaction, where one is not so much irritated by the driving forces of our senses or others around us. It was a nice experience. In this little farm, our friends got there in Shatbury. They build houses, little houses, and they're using materials from in and around the property. When they're making one wood house, nothing unusual about that, but they're making it without any electricity. And I say, not just the house will have no electricity, but the way they're making it, they're not using tools which are electrical. Of course, it's not completely true because the tools they're using are made by industry, but still, their hand, everything's done by hand, the chisels and saws. It's taking a long time. I asked them, seems to be an endeavor to build one house, and it's going to take you years. Aren't you kind of thinking it would be more practical to employ some modern machinery? You could do it in months probably. So, maybe you could do that, but we're happy doing this. We're feeling happy. And not just happy, but we feel very in touch with the spiritual side, with the Krishna conscious side, in touch with the inner, deeper, much deeper than just on the surface, the deeper needs, the deeper aspirations for all of us to find ourselves. And our spiritual master, teacher, guru, taught us this. He asked us to try to live simply and think highly, spiritual thoughts. And live simply, with just the necessities of life. But it seemed like it was taking a lot more time. I was thinking, how are they saving time for spiritual life or practices? Seems like you have to work a lot harder. And they replied, that may be so, but we're very happy working, and all the time that we're working, if we can sing, we're singing Krishna's names, we're talking about Krishna, we're remembering our spiritual nature and our relationship with Krishna, which there are different paths of yoga, and there are different, perhaps, people have different objectives in one sense, but this is a spiritual objective, and they're achieving that through their work. It's not you work so you get their work now. People work and they're trying to get holidays, time off, weekends, because they're not satisfied. And work is a means to try to purchase satisfaction in too many cases. Some people may be satisfied up to a point. Still they have to resort to intoxicants and other forms of relief or indulgence. There's no need. They're satisfied in their work and fulfilling their spiritual needs. What more do you need? People may look down on such an idea, but if it fulfills your actual intentions, you should not be so negative about it. Very simple. It's very difficult, no doubt. We're so conditioned now with whatever we're conditioned by. We're accepting as norms to have various things, mobiles, computers, modern communication techniques, vehicle transport, just like it took us around about 40 minutes almost to get here. We could have walked in 12 minutes. But, what to do? Well, we're going, where are we going? Is it really, I mean, we made it an important feature that we have to go somewhere to get something. Maybe when I was a kid, if you want to call it that, everything came to our doorstep. The milk came to the doorstep. The grocery, all the fresh vegetables from the fields nearby were coming daily in a little vehicle, sometimes horse-driven. The vehicle with all the vegetables on, and the milk was delivered fresh in the morning from the dairy, not even pasteurized practically. That was poor, materially speaking, we were poor, but at least we were getting food, which was fresh, and it was a little dangerous. They used to have food which was called organic. I don't know if you've heard of organic food. Very dangerous stuff. No. And the milk was very dangerous. It wasn't homogenized, standardized, stabilized, or reconstituted. Very dangerous stuff. It was a funny age. But that people, they didn't know what inorganic food was. It didn't exist. Now we hardly know what organic food is. Even if they call it organic, it's not organic most of the time. Partially, whatever that is. World Health Organization, whatever it's called. As long as it's 70% organic, they put their stamp on it. So, a funny world. It's not funny in the sense of it, you know what I mean? And is it really fulfilling the inner desire of us all? So in the midst of all this, right here we are, right in the centre of London practically. Who am I to talk? I'm not in the fields, I'm not living a simple life. But we've seen and we've experienced to some extent, and we know what our spiritual teachers requested and we like to work towards. Encourage it, at least amongst devoted youngsters in general, people in general, to look into it and see. At least we can try. Perhaps we have a little garden or something to grow your own food a little bit. Try a little bit to do something. And the thing. Simple living and high thinking. Whatever it is, we're trying to at least. The main thing is not just to live like that, but it's a change of consciousness. There are people living in jungles very simply. Fine in one sense. Another sense is not of any particular value unless there's a change in the consciousness. If we're still thinking in terms of material satisfaction only, we remain in this world of birth and death, in this world of duality, in this world where there's inevitable suffering and frustration of various kinds. There's the consciousness which recounts. This is there to facilitate, make it a little bit more peaceful for that conscious change to take place. But in spite of maybe not having that opportunity or facility around us, and we all know that most people don't really know where they're going. Leadership doesn't really know, it's just whatever it is, we don't go there. And certainly dissatisfaction is there. Sometimes speak up and act on their dissatisfaction. And even if they change the leadership, it's still the same. Same problems remain. It's an inner thing which we see. It's not everybody else. It's ourselves to look within our own hearts. It's how we're seeing the world that is the actual crucial factor. How we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see the world. The essential feature about the yoga, that conscious, is the conscious change. What is called Krishna conscious. Krishna conscious is not some kind of crutch that you hold on to. It's actually, we use that term, but it actually means self-awareness, it means self-realization, realizing our real self, and being in that state of consciousness. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita, you'll see, in that state of consciousness, one remains undisturbed internally, even in the midst of all kinds of causes of disturbance, be there personal, physical, mental, other situations, environmental, the behavior of other living entities, the weather, the world events, everything you can think of practically can cause some form of distress. And even if it temporarily gives us happiness, it's only another feature of this fallible world. We come to that platform of infallibility, and it's not any more dependent on one's inner happiness on all the various objects around us. And seeing the world differently. Instead of seeing the world as object to satisfy my desires, but I see it as a facility to awaken our self-conscious or self-realization, our God-realization, whatever you understand it as, but ultimately it's realizing the absolute truth and realizing the whole purpose of human life is not simply meant for existence, not simply meant for material progress, but something very much deeper. And in that way we don't reject what's there, but rather we utilize it from a different perspective. So it's a change of how we see things. Instead of seeing them as possible objects for my pleasure, we see them as energy of the Supreme, which can be used to help people to realize their relationship with the Supreme, their relationship with them, or even understanding who they are, and feeling peaceful and happy in their life. And Prabhupada, our spiritual teacher, said that what we want is to be happy and to see others happy also. We don't like to see other people unhappy, suffering. Hare Krishna. And this process of chanting Hare Krishna is a simple process of yoga and meditation, which, when we hear that mantra, helps us to help the heart to change automatically. By association, changes take place. When we associate with cold, we feel cold. Heat, we feel hot. Similarly, when we associate with a spiritual sound, it helps to spiritualize our vision. It's very sweet. It's not very austere, really. Very joyful. Very joyful means of self-realization, even at our stage. Joyfully performed. Simply as chanting, dancing, whatever we're doing in life can be done in that consciousness of its relationship with the Supreme. Sorry. Do the same things practically, but in a different state of consciousness and so on. We call it Krishna consciousness. In particular, this chant is the means to clarify, purify our vision, and then seeing things in a different way, seeing people not only on the external platform, men or women or black or white, friend or enemy, whatever it may be, and seeing them as spiritual entities, more or less controlled by whatever coverings they have, whatever identities they have, driving them to behave in such a way against each other. As we understand, this is the unity, or the oneness that people talk about, is when we begin to see things a little bit more on a materially selfless platform, a spiritual platform. We try to act, and we may not realize at this moment of time, act in a way which is in that direction, which will naturally help to evoke the perception of the world around us and the world with it. So I guess this time up we started a little late, and there might be a question or two. 7:30 almost. Would you like to ask a question? Don't be shy. Please feel free. You can ask any question. It doesn't have to be about the waffle that I just... anything. You can ask why have you got that mark on my head if you want. I'll transform it to something more general. Yes?
How do you find peace in deep grief?
How do I find
Peace in deep grief.
in grief?
Yes.
With great difficulty. I'm sure you will experience that to different degrees. Who hasn't? If you haven't, you soon will, because there is always a cause of grief throughout our life at different stages, whether it's loss of a dear one, or whatever it may be, different things that may cause us grief. Usually it's due to loss of somebody or something. It could be anything. That's really, you could say, the root of our life in many ways, is to, as I briefly mentioned, to be undisturbed even in face of normal causes of disturbance. As we may not be so mature spiritually evolved or spiritually realized, it's a nice idea, but it's not so easy to apply. Theory certainly can help to some extent to, it doesn't really resolve the natural emotions of a living being. We just had an experience of that in France. I mean, just as we were leaving, we had quite a shock actually. We had these two beautiful little bullocks, very young. They came to us, they were going to be trained for the slaughterhouse, of course. We bought them from the farmers and happily sold them to us. They were only about 1 month old. And we're looking at them, maybe 6, 7 months old now. They're really sweet little bullocks. They're twins, born twins. Rare breed in France, very rare. And they're very, very loving and sweet. They're just so sweet. And one of them, somehow or another, greatly misfortunate. They're Troy, you would say, somehow or another, overate. And before anyone could find what was going on, left his body, bloated. And the other one, his twin brother, of course, such an emotional challenge. Okay, animals, the cow, but so emotional. Previously, they would walk up to you and, just like loving children or something. And now anyone go near him practically, it's like so emotionally disturbed, so distressed, so difficult. That's just animal. Spirit's not just an animal, it's a soul in an animal's body. And it has the same emotional responses, expressed differently. Or to speak of more evolved in consciousness human body, a soul in a human body, it's very difficult. But when we're lacking ourselves the self-realization, which naturally helps one to realize that there's not really any loss at all, because the soul is eternal. The energy is eternal, it changes its form also. And the soul, which is, if we're talking sequence, and just give an example, you may have other situations, but we'll give an example. You lose somebody who's very dear to you, they leave their body, they die. You can be grief-stricken, especially as a child. A mother is naturally extremely difficult. But with spiritualization, if we read Bhagavad Gita, at least we can understand more the principle of the soul, the eternality of the soul. The soul is moving on to another form. The soul is not dead. The body may have been relinquished. That's painful for all of us. But the soul is eternal. So with that knowledge, at least it helps us, not necessarily as a conscious, sentient beings that we are. It's not that we're callous or, we're not machines or stones. We're living entities. We have feelings. That's meant to be. That's coming from the soul. We're covered by ignorance, so it becomes extremely stressful in this world. When they remove the ignorance, and I just had one devotee very close to me, he's in Nepal right now, of course, that's another subject. He's from Nepal. His mother just passed away. He was with his mother for maybe a month or two before he went from England to be with his mother for 1 or 2 months before she left her body. And he said when she left, when she finally died, he'd been with her most of the time by her bedside, consoling her, speaking to her, chanting spiritual Hare Krishna mantra. And when she left her body, he actually felt extremely blissful. Felt like her life was successful. We're all going to leave our bodies sooner or later. And, in the case, because for a whole month she was just hearing and chanting, being with others who were hearing and chanting, and particularly him, of course. And he felt like it was very auspicious event. And he was very attached to his mother, as most Indian body people. Everyone is, especially in Asia. So because of his spiritual consciousness, he was able to perceive beyond the material change that took place. But if we only have material knowledge, it's very difficult. It's difficult anyway. If we only have material knowledge, that's all we have. It's just a material experience. spiritual, it's emotional, it's internal, but it's based upon material, only material knowledge, but spiritual knowledge, spiritual awareness becomes another different perception of the same situation. So in that situation, we're not so spiritually advanced, spiritually realized. It's very good if we have others around us who are, who can help hold our hand, who can help us to walk through that great difficult path which we all have to go through in life to some degree, depending on the level of our consciousness. The more conscious we are in one sense materially, the more evolved we are, the more in one sense it's painful. The lower our level of consciousness, the less we may experience it. When we become Christian conscious or spiritually conscious, and that's another level. But one can rise above the dualities of this world and see from above what we can actually do to help that person who's left their body. I'm talking about that one aspect that could be called a grief on the person who is still alive, who's attached to the person who's left their body. And see it from a different angle to try to help them to understand their inner nature, their spiritual nature. You can solve them on both levels. Of course, in the beginning, it's friendship and helping them whatever way you can, just being there to hold their hand, whatever it may be. And then, whenever the chances are there, try to help bring in a little real consolation, not just what can we do, but we can do something to realize the nature of the actual self, not just the temporary nature, the material nature. And thank you for bringing up that topic. I hope you get some help if you are experiencing that yourself. It's very painful. Anything else?
I've recently been very curious about the topic around celibacy.
Celibacy.
Yeah. So what can you share with me about this topic?
You were looking into it, or you were curious about it, or what?
Yeah, I feel like a part of me is called to it, but another part of me is pulled out of it. If that makes any sense.
No, nothing unusual about that, by the way.
Sorry?
Nothing unusual. Well, it's unusual that you may think that, most of us think that it's not something which is a priority in our life to be celibate. And I can say from my youth, there wasn't much consciousness of celibacy, I must say. Quite different. I mean, not any different than anyone else, but I guess it's still the same today. That's one area that doesn't change too much. It might change its form, but it doesn't change its nature. That the urge, let's say, the natural urge of everyone for pleasure, for satisfaction. Sex life is probably the most, at least, intensive form of satisfaction. I mean, it should be a bit more deeper than that, by the way, but we're just talking about the sexual side of it. And yeah, it's a pretty intensive form of material pleasure. There is a spiritual form of sex pleasure. That's another topic. But what to do? Celibacy, what does it mean? There's different types of approaches to that, and there are different philosophies on it. It's a known fact, according to the history of Europe at least, that celibacy was encouraged in certain cultures and societies of Europe, amongst the Romans, the Greeks, and not all, but amongst certain strands of Greeks and Romans, celibacy was highly encouraged, and they compared it to the achievement of success in their endeavors, strength, character, many things they aligned with celibacy. The meaning of celibacy in spiritual progress or as a practice is not to indulge in unnecessary sex life. Everyone needs sex life in the normal sense of the term, but it's regulated within married life, whatever that is, and supposed to be regulated with one partner, supposed to be. We know how difficult it is, especially the day we're in. There's even more driving, I think, than before. So if you want to practice spiritual, I don't think that any genuine spiritual practice doesn't have any, let's say, method to, or at least philosophy to understand the importance of regulation, celibacy. It is one of those aspects of yoga, of spiritual life, even traditional religiosity, of celibacy, understood maybe slightly differently, different cultures, but is a very important aspect of our life practice. It doesn't mean denial, but it means this balancing, regulation, like that, and not just licentious behavior, just letting go at the first opportunity. So according to the individual situation, has to use common sense, but to try to regulate it, to try to minimize the need. But how to do that? Krishna himself mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that the methodology is not that you can just do it. What is it that we get from sex life is an incredible form of satisfaction. There's obviously more to it than supposed to be. It's supposed to be a relationship there. It's supposed to be perhaps the procreation there. Maybe there's a natural features, but in terms of satisfaction, obviously it's a pleasure that we wouldn't do it otherwise. So pleasure. So it's a very famous statement of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a Sanskrit verse I won't mention it. You can't give up these tastes unless you have a higher taste. It's a higher taste. And that's really what the Hare Krishna was meant to be providing. I can't guarantee that, we ourselves are, say, often we are, but I can say we're manifesting an example of that, but that's the principle. That one experiences a higher taste. A higher taste. When you have a higher taste, in other words, when your satisfaction needs are met, then the inclination may be there, but there's not much interest in it, in a sense, because you're getting more satisfaction from another source. One doesn't need to be indulging in that. It's a natural thing. It's not an unnatural growth. So developing a higher taste is not about just controlling it and rationalizing and fighting against it. I used to, at a point in my life, at 19 or something, I tried to fight against it. I kind of had a realization, this is not going to do me any good. Having sex almost every day. I thought it wasn't really good for my overall mental and physical well-being. Something seemed wrong about it. I'm sure most of you can understand that. But I tried to fight against it, very difficult. When I started chanting Hare Krishna, and after some years later, and it didn't seem to be such an issue anymore. There was another type of pleasure, another type of satisfaction replaced it. It's replaced that driving need. So you have your choices. People will argue against that. That's their choice. You can't force anyone. But we're offering that opportunity. So add that to your life and see for yourself. And in most cases, one finds it's not necessarily it goes away entirely, but the inclination definitely reduces. It's like a fever, it reduces considerably. terrible like that. But it's like a burning fever, you cannot hardly can resist it. But it helps to reduce that tendency or that demand when one has a higher taste. The taste satisfaction within which is even greater than that one, and which continues, it's not dependent on, whatever it is, moments of indulgence. But it's important, but at the same time, it's not the goal of life. But it facilitates, if we understand our spiritual goal, it can facilitate the practice of spirituality, but not without a doubt. But the actual application of spiritual practices helps automatically to deal with that question. Doesn't as they occur, as much at least. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, time to break no man. Master of ceremonies case.
Maharaj, would you like to lead some kirtan?
Would I like to lead it or follow it? I'll try. I'm exhausted after that car journey. I wanted to walk. So anyway, I think many of you are familiar. How many of you are familiar with this chanting Hare Krishna? Anybody? Hands up if you are. And a few of you not familiar with it. No? You've heard it? See?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty simple. Maybe you did a bit earlier on if you were here. Pretty simple. You say, well, it's just the same thing over and over again. I know when I first started chanting, I was in an apartment before I met the Hare Krishna devotee. I started chanting. I got some things I heard about this and that. Started chanting. What are you doing? It's chant fish and chips, chips. But it's not the same. Not at all. It's very amazing experience within, even without realization. It's experience from incredible people coming up and ganging up on me, and attacking me from behind. It's dangerous spot. And it's so nice. It brings unity, satisfaction within unity amongst us. Who you are, what you are, man, woman, atheist, deist, religionist, communist, it doesn't make no difference what you call yourself. If we together sing this mantra, it can bring a feeling of brotherhood, unity, relationship with Krishna, of course, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for loving relationships. That's what my king is saying. Loving relationships. The loving relationship ultimately with the supreme lover, Krishna. So we welcome you to chant with us, and may rise to our feet after a few minutes and see what happens. We normally do. This movement is based on chanting more or less. Started with chanting the world, not in the beginning of its initial. Instead, this is an internal movement. But in the Western world in 1965, our spiritual master was going apart alone practically of New York, chanting this Mahamantra, and people slowly came around and joined in. So we welcome you all to as we chant. Is the mantra on the wall somewhere?
Yeah. Yes.
The normal processes. We have a lead and response system. We're not going to push the issue, but that's normally how it is. One of us will lead and we will listen, and then you respond. We listen, and then we sing, you listen, like that. And so chanting, hearing, and their hearts. The sound can go into our heart and soothe our hearts, purify our hearts, awaken the real nature of the soul, compassion, and so many other qualities can awaken in our hearts. humility, tolerance, freedom from so many unwanted tendencies and so on. Okay, we better go on because otherwise they'll start pushing it in my hand. I got the message. They're very modern persons. They're very sophisticated in their tunes and their musical talents, and it's very nice. I know nothing like this. And it's some old antique 50s. And Elvis Presley. Really interesting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Another round of applause for all of you for singing and dancing. every Wednesday, every Friday, and every Sunday. So if you had fun, please come back.